I can't believe that a kid out of DeMatha is going to be the #1 overall pick in the draft, especially a kid who only played 2 years at the varsity level. But give us a little background on Markelle. When's the first time you saw him play? What was he like as a player when you first saw him? How'd you convince him to come to DeMatha? Give us all the background on him.
All right, so first of all, I saw him for the first time when he was either 7 or 8 years old, when he came to our basketball camp. So I wasn't recruiting a 7 or 8-year-old, but, we had a pretty good level of talent in our younger age groups back then, Markelle being one of them. And contrary to popular belief, we didn't recruit Markelle to come to DeMatha. Markelle wanted to come to DeMatha because of his time at camp.
Okay. He
spent time around our older players, and he wanted to come there. So the summer in between his 8th and 9th grade year, his family reached out. Keith Williams, the male figure in his life, reached out and just asked, hey, did we think Markelle was, going to be able to have a place in our program? And we did say yes, he would. And that's how he got to us. It wasn't we followed him around and went to every 8th grade game. He wanted to come to us. Obviously.
What public school would he have gone to?
That's a good question. I don't know, maybe Douglas or maybe Wise. I'm not sure. Over in that area up on Marlboro.
Gotcha.
One of those schools.
Okay.
Now, when he was there at DeMatha and he played, I assume he played freshman, his freshman year, and then JV. Everybody knows he was on the JV his sophomore year. Was that a difficult decision for you to keep him on at the JV level, or was that just sort of a natural progression and no one could foresee the leap he made? I think it was that summer, right, after his sophomore year, going into his junior year, where he kind of all of a sudden just blew up on everybody's radar?
Right. Well, a couple of things. Number one, yes, it was a very difficult decision. There was a lot of behind closed doors, and, I call it arguing amongst our coaching staff. And, I was one of the one on the island in terms of, hey, he probably needs to play a year JV. And I looked at it as a leadership, kind of being able to be the guy. I didn't want him not getting consistent minutes on the varsity level. And obviously in hindsight, I was way wrong about that. He was just somebody who, it wasn't an easy decision because he worked so hard, but there's a lot of things that went into that. He hadn't really gone through his growth spurt yet. He was still under 6 feet tall. And, he just had some development to do. But, again, in hindsight, he clearly would have been one of our best players that year as a sophomore. But I just wasn't convinced in the fall of that year.
Well, that's a key factor, Mike. That's a key factor, though. The growth spurt hadn't kicked in.
Absolutely. And again, you can look back and say, hey, that was the wrong decision. Fortunately enough for me and fortunately enough for DeMatha, he didn't leave.
Right.
He just, went out to prove us all wrong. And I won't say us all wrong. He went out to prove me wrong. And he did that and much, much more.
All right, so junior year, his first year on varsity, when did you know that this kid had it? When did you know that this kid was special?
Well, in the summer before his junior year. He went to one of the camps, I want to say maybe a John Lucas camp out in the Midwest or something like that. And, literally, he left on a Thursday night or a Friday morning. And by Friday night, Saturday morning, my phone was ringing from all of my buddies that do scouting things with Rivals and Scout.com and 24/7. And they were just all like, yo, where'd this kid come from?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, well, he was on our JV. And it's like, Mike, seriously, he's the best player here. And I knew the other players there. And I'm just like, really? And they're just telling me that, and when he came back, he just had this newfound confidence about himself, and he really started to dominate summer league basketball and, our locker room with his presence, the way he communicated, and, he really turned into a leader.
Yeah. I was telling the boys this earlier, Mike, I just remember seeing him his junior year. I was at DeMatha for, I believe it was the Paul VI game. I really wanted to see DJ Harvey play. I didn't know much about Markelle at the time. And, man, his motor, he just never stopped. He was always around the hoop. He was a great player in that game anyway. He scored at will. In transition, he was unstoppable. And I'm thinking to myself, where'd this kid come from? Mm-hmm. I knew nothing about him. I'm like, this kid is a high D1 kid. And then, obviously, he kind of took off in his junior year and was even better in his senior year.
Right, and you bring up the defensive part. I know, again, when you've been as highly ranked as he has been for, a little bit more than the past year, at some point in time it turns into from praising him to figuring out, okay, there's got to be something wrong with him, and guys are nitpicking. I definitely think people are nitpicking when they talk about his defense. I mean, he was one of our best defenders. He guarded the best players we played, and it's not like we were playing chopped liver. So people concerned with his defense, I think, are very misguided, and they've never seen him play. Washington, for lack of a better way of saying it, they were a bad defensive team, and you can't, put that on just one person. I mean, basketball is a team sport.